Hey y'all, it's Dr. Mandy, researcher and editor extraordinaire, and you're listening to Dr. Mandy Unedited, the podcast that explains research in plain English. Okay, I tried to be very energetic about that, and then it was just all over the place, but that's okay. You get the gist. So, today we are discussing the basics of writing a research paper. So, what we're going to do is cover the basics of academic structure of a paper, writing with objectivity, the structure of a research paper, and some other general writing tips. So, whether you are just starting out in higher education or you're somebody who is just having a tough time mastering the art of academic writing and writing research papers, I thought that I'd take a minute to break this down for us. I thought this would also be a good topic for today because, as you may or may not know, I am on a social media journey and I have had some discussions with some really wonderful people that I've met on TikTok, especially a wonderful gentleman called Harrison of the North. So I think that's at Harrison of the North on TikTok if you're interested in checking out some of his videos. He has some really interesting videos on Celtic culture, I believe. Hopefully, I have not said that incorrectly, but he, along with some of my other academic friends, have been asking me, like tips on writing academically. So shameless plug if you're not already following me on social media, check out my TikTok. It's called at life with Dr. Mandy, and so doctor is just DR. Mandy, of course, is MANDIE. That's at life with Dr. Mandy on TikTok. I talk about a few different topics on there. However, my long-term plan is to create lots of extra research tidbits. I really want to create a research community as TikTok kind of grows into a bigger search engine. So be on the lookout for some information about TikTok Office in the future. And I also want to, create some digital courses that will be available through TikTok. So feel free to check that out. Maybe go have a follow, go have a like, and you can also feel free to contact me on there as well for any questions or any content requests, as a lot of other people do. So, okay, no goss for today, because if I do, it's just going to be about how stupid this weather is. And I've talked about the weather so many times on this podcast. My partner and I were discussing this morning about how we've never paid attention to the weather and had to analyze it on a daily basis until we came to the UK. And so now it just makes me mad because the past few days it has been pouring sunny, pouring while sunny. And here's the thing, I always talk about this on the podcast. So that is just a thing that gets me in life, you know what I mean? So I like to go for a run in the mornings. I like to get my head on straight for the day. But on Monday, for example, I waited until the afternoon to go for my run because it was pouring so hard. But guess what? When I got down to the sidewalk, not 50 feet away from my house, the pavement was completely dry. That's what kind of chaos I am dealing with in the UK, y'all. It was literally like blue skies outside, but somehow it's still pouring rain. And then somehow, not a throne's throw away, everything is completely dry, even though I'm just I'm just watching the downpour. Anyway, what the heck. So, also, I'm sorry for my international listeners for the US terms. The goss is mostly for my US friends who listen back home. I have so many wonderful friends that just listen to all of my research nonsense just to be supportive. So I try to throw some stuff interesting in there for them. Let's talk about what is academic writing. So it's structured thinking with an intro, a body, and a conclusion. And you are building an argument that is evidence-based, objective, which means not opinionated, and is written academically. And so, yeah, let's just start off with the basics of writing like any kind of paper. What is an intro, a body, and a conclusion? And maybe you're listening to this and you think, oh, well, that's a little bit basic, Mandy, but you never know. You never know what you might learn from stuff like this. So, let's talk about an introduction for 2 seconds, okay? So this is the foundation in any kind of introduction, in any kind of academic paper that you write. You should have, what is the topic? Why does it matter? And what is your argument? And so really, in an introduction, if you're somebody that struggles to figure out how to start writing a paper, if you cover each of those three things, what's the topic, why does it matter, and what is your argument, like 1 or 2 sentences for each of those things, you will pretty much nail an introduction every single time. All right, so then let's talk about a body. Okay, of course, the body is the meat and potatoes of the entire paper. Okay, so each paragraph should support your main argument with evidence, analysis, and some clear transitions, okay? The conclusion, it's just the cherry on top. I think a lot of people overthink the conclusion. I think a lot of people are afraid of repeating themselves too much in academic writing. But look, here's the thing. That's what academic writing is kind of meant to do. So if you're one of those people that worries a little bit about repeating yourself too much, it's okay, because something like a conclusion will sound a bit repetitive. And so all a conclusion is just a paragraph or two of just summarizing your key points. And then you're going to leave your reader with something to think about, something to take away, and really, underscoring why they should continue to have this mulling around in their mind. Now, let's take a second to talk about writing objectively, because that's what academic writing is all about. If you want to write about your thoughts and feelings and opinions and emotions, go get into some fiction work, go be a literary author, okay? But in academic writing, we gotta write objectively. And I see a lot of people get confused about this, especially when you're writing about a topic that might be a subject that you are immersed in as a person. So, for example, like when we're writing dissertations, when we're writing theses, we're writing it on a specific field, right? Like I was a teacher, I wrote my dissertation on an education topic, and therefore sometimes it's really hard to differentiate between what's objective and what is like your opinion, or well, subjective, whatever. What passionate statement are you making that you forget, oh, that might not be factual, it might be all in my head. So yeah, I find a lot of people struggle with this because I think that they feel like writing objectively takes all the passion out of the writing, and sometimes I think people feel like it makes them write like a robot, you know what I mean? But it doesn't have to be that way. So some tips on writing objectively from me would be like, as you are writing, just stop every paragraph or so and ask yourself, can these claims be backed up by evidence? Is my point clear? And so by identifying those couple of things, you might find like, oh, I need to add some more evidence to, maybe you did make like kind of a passionate statement, but you have to give some evidence to really back that up. And now you have kind of a more of a narrative to your paper. That is a good way to help yourself sound like you're kind of telling more of a story rather than just, reporting on blah, blah, blah. And then on the flip side, if you're asking yourself, is my point clear? Oftentimes you might go back and read your work and realize that you have maybe put a sentence or two of kind of, like your own passionate, subjective points. And that might be what's muddying up the writing. So you can just go out and edit a couple couple of those out. And then look up some of these like key phrases that, people use in academic writing and start using these throughout your paper just to help you like maintain that sense of like, professional academic writing. So think about using phrases every once in a while, like the evidence suggests, or this study indicates. And so, maybe one or two openers like this in a paragraph will help you stay grounded while still guiding your reader through your perspective. All right, now let's talk about a really important thing, y'all. Let's talk about the language of your paper. So I think a lot of people also get caught up on this because they can't really figure out how to talk academically, right? So first of all, I think some people are caught up in the jargon, like, they really want to make their paper sound academic. But I find that sometimes that sacrifices, clarity. It's the worst thing in the world when you try to read a paper that is just so dense with academic jargon that you just don't understand anything, right? So really, I would say don't worry about sounding academic when you write. I know that would be a little bit of a shock to say, but I think just, cutting out on the fancy phrases will make your writing so much better. Trust me. So just don't worry. I think so many people just worry about how they sound academically. Just write the dang thing. You know what I mean? Just write the dang thing in your own voice. But there are some obvious things, to avoid, such as we don't want to write in first person. So it's not you who is the focus, right? You're the researcher. You're supposed to be the instrument. The research is what's important. So don't write in first person in your academic paper if you can help it. So sometimes, especially if you're writing like a research positionality in a dissertation or a thesis, yeah, you're going to be able to use first person in that because it's very brief. However, it can make your writing sound really lazy and unprofessional if you're like, I did this and then I thought this, so I went and talked about something else with somebody else. It just really starts to sound a little bit crazy. So you don't need to refer to yourself for the most part. If you do need to refer to yourself as, a key point to make within a paper, you refer to yourself in the third person, all right? You can say, the researcher did blah, blah, blah. And I know sometimes that does sound a little bit awkward, but trust me, if you try to go down the first person trail, sometimes, look, it can just be so much hotter of a mess, okay? And then the last thing, look, I know some of us might be like, oh, like, I would have never thought about using things like this in an academic paper, but I see this in dissertations, I see this in theses, I see these in journal articles. Don't use contractions, y'all. Don't use contractions. Don't use shortened words, okay? So, yes, I have seen the word ain't in a dissertation. Yes, I have seen papers with, the letter U instead of YOU. This is just a non-negotiable, okay? I know that for some people, I think some people do use like speech to text as like an accessibility tool. And so I think sometimes that's why these things come through. But if you do use accessibility tools, I'm all about it. But you need to double check, y'all. Double check what went down on that paper or have someone else check it for you. But at the end of the day, I still just see like, and no matter what kind of paper I'm reading, no matter what kind of thing I'm editing, I still see so many contractions and shortened words. And, that's just something that cannot exist in academic writing. Okay. Okay. That's just something I'm very passionate about. Moving on. Now, how to start writing a paper. So we're going to kind of like assume that you've already found all the info. We'll assume that you found theories, blah, 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 blah. I can talk more about that in the future. For now, we are just presuming that you're ready to write the dang thing, okay? So first, you need to figure out what type of planning is good for you. So sometimes you may be an outline person, all right? And however, you may be like me and you need to be an info dump type of person. If you're an outline person, I would suggest, starting out by writing different levels of your outline that will eventually be like the headings of your paper, right? So each point of your outline is just going to basically be a different heading. And then once you've written down that kind of brief structure, don't think too hard on it. Go back and under each heading, write a sentence or two of key information under each and then, yeah, note down some citations as well. And so this way you can kind of see the flow and the transitions of your entire paper. I know, like, when I write a lot of my tutorials and things like that that are available on my link tree in the description, I do always promote outlines because I think like even if you're not an outline person, they're just a good visual to understand maybe even how your mind should work. However, look, y'all, I mean, I'm for real life, I've got like the ADHD, so I don't actually use outlines myself when I write. I am an info dump person, and so this is what happens when you're an info dump person. So what I do is I write pretty much everything that I know down about the topic on a paper. And then I go back and kick out what is irrelevant. I add in what needs to be beefed up, and then I insert citations back into the information. Now, this is not for everyone. Some people need that clear visual structure, to really get a paper going. However, there's people on the flip side like myself. For me, I've always tried to force myself to write outlines. However, I never stick to them, and my mind just works so much more fluidly, so much more efficiently when I basically make the paper as my outline, and then I can go back and I can pop stuff in. But yeah, it's different for everyone. One way might not be as clear for another person. But yeah, if you find yourself having to like force yourself to make an outline and it's like the most miserable part, there's no shame in trying a little info dump. I think sometimes they even call it mind mapping. I don't know. I'll have to look more into that. But anyway, okay. So now let's talk about the different parts if you're writing more of like a research paper or like kind of like a journal article. Okay. So first of all, I find that these kind of papers, they vary. They can, I think, like, when I first wrote my dissertation, and dissertations or theses, they often have like templates that the school requires you to hit every single heading. You know what I mean? It's very rigid, but research papers can be more fluid. They can have different structures. They can have different headings or things like that. But if you're kind of new to writing papers, here's like kind of like a good general outline. But if you want some more info, something I always suggest that is really helpful is just going and reading other papers and looking how they structured. Find a paper that's similar to the one that you want to write and follow that structure. But for the most part, in some way, shape, or form, this is what should be in a research paper. So, first of all, you got the introduction. We already talked about what an introduction is, but just to expand in the terms of a research paper, this is giving the reader, yeah, like the context of the paper. It presents the topic or the research question, but this is not the first part that you'll write of your paper. In fact, it's probably likely going to be the last part that you write, along with maybe your abstract. So the first part of your paper that you may write is probably going to be the literature review, which basically analyzes and synthesizes existing research. It shows gaps in the literature. Where are the tensions between researchers on this topic? You may have to write this first because this section is kind of like the research that you're doing for the research of your paper. And this basically kind of gives a reader a background. So sometimes, yeah, you might find alternative headings of background or historical background or previous literature, things like that. But yeah, you can check out some of my previous episodes. I've talked all about how to write literature reviews. I got 2 episodes on those, so go back and check those out if you need a little help with that. Next, you may have a methodology section. And so this explains just, how you gathered and analyzed data. This section does not need to be fancy. It can seem a little bit like you're writing a list, because you basically need to list out everything that you did within your research. So yeah, this is not going to be some great literary section that you're writing in the methodology, okay? It's just going to be blatant things that are going to help make your research transferable and credible. And again, we've been talking all about methods and also reflexivity in previous episodes, so go check those out. Then you will have a results, or sometimes it's called a findings section. And so this is where you are only presenting the findings, okay? This is very important because a lot of people get this mixed up with like an analysis or a discussion section, right? So you are literally only telling us what happened in the research. What did you find? There is no interpretation. There is no like opinions. You are just discussing what happened in the findings section or the results section. Okay, I can't underscore that enough. Then you'll get to a discussion section. Okay, so then you can discuss what your analysis was of the results. What do they mean? You can connect the results back to the question. You can explore implications. So this is the section where you can be a little bit more flowy with it. And finally, yeah, you've got a conclusion, which is going to wrap up the paper. Again, probably one of those last things you'll write. Obviously, it's got a conclusion, I guess. But like I said in the beginning, it might sound like you are repeating yourself, but don't be afraid to. It's just simply going to restate the key points and suggest, where future researchers can expand on the topic, okay? So now throughout your paper, don't forget to put in your references. Look, I don't know about y'all. I know some of y'all don't put any references or citations into your paper until the end. I try to, accommodate for everybody, but y'all just need y'all just need to put your references in while you go, okay? I can talk all day about that, but I would just keep track of your references and yeah, put the citations in as you go. Don't wait until the end and try to like I don't know how y'all do that. Just remember where you got like hundreds of papers you've probably read for this topic, and then you just drop the citations in at the end. That's crazy. But I mean, if you can do it, you can do it, but I wouldn't suggest it. But anyway, that is the basics of writing a research paper, the basics of writing academically. Hopefully that helped. If there were some things that seemed like, maybe a little phased over for you, it's probably because I've already talked about it in previous episodes. So go ahead and check all of that out. I know mostly I talk about writing for dissertations and theses. However, I mean, basically, it's the same thing. If you want to write, a literature review for a paper, same process as writing a literature review for a dissertation. If you want to write a discussion section for a paper, same process as a dissertation or a thesis, okay? It's just going to be shorter, obviously. Anyway, if you need some help, if you need some coaching, if you need some help editing your paper, please reach out to me, okay? You can do that a couple of different ways. You can either email me at mandykf@gmail.com. That's MANDIE kangaroo foxtrot @gmail.com. Or you can reach out to me through my website, what was that? www.drmandyedits.com. And then, of course, I said, yeah, if you want to see what else I'm doing in my life, if you're a social media person, you prefer to connect with people that way, go check out my TikTok account at at Life with Dr. Mandy on TikTok, okay? Anyway, for now, I'm up to my eyeballs in research projects, so I gotta go do some of that. Go breathe some fresh air before you sit down, and I will see you later, okay? See you, bye.